It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, speaking with Elisa Fortise Christensen about her book entitled Teen Warrior, Raising Addiction-Resistant Kids. And folks who know where I'm from, we're here in Vancouver, BC, which has a huge population of people who have difficulties with addiction. And so it's always an issue that's on my mind here. Elise, how did you write this book? What happened?
Well, I think it was a personal journey for me as a follow-up to my first book, which was titled The Fentanyl Warrior: How I Got Off and Stayed Off Opiates. And that book was born out of my own journey after being on doctor-prescribed opiates for 30 years after breaking my back. I started a hairline fracture in my early teens, falling off a skateboard. And then as an adult, I became a triathlete, and all of the pounding from the running caused my fifth lumbar to fracture all the way through. And I ended up having to have two-level fusion surgeries. And all of that I went through landed me on, first Vicodin, and then I graduated to Percocet, and then to Dilaudid, and eventually I ended up on fentanyl patches. So I was on opiates for about 30 years, building up a tolerance that eventually landed me on fentanyl patches for about 11 years. And throughout that, I finally did get off of them. And when I finally got off of them in 2017, and I started thinking about my next book, I, at the time, had an 11 and a 12-year-old boy I was raising, and I became acutely concerned about what we could do as parents, especially in the United States, where we have such a rampant problem with addiction, and especially with young addicts and alcoholics that are abusing alcohol and drugs. And I wanted to find out what I could do as a parent, but also what information I could gather, not just from this country, but from around the world, what other countries and other parents were doing better than us to help prevent our young daughters and sons to run head first into addiction. What could we do? What are other parents around the world doing better? And what could we put in place? What kind of preventative measures could we put in place? And when do we need to do it? And how do we need to implement it to help build addiction-resistant kids as much as we could? So that was the motivation behind the Teen Warrior.
And so I just want to emphasize that it's a hidden drug addiction problem, I think, in some ways, is that there are many, many people who are prescribed painkillers and end up addicted to them. And it's kind of sanitized because a doctor gave it to you. And so it's not seen as the same kind of addiction as somebody who perhaps is using street drugs. But it is, in fact, the same addiction. It's the same process that happens in our brain, right?
Absolutely. And, it, unfortunately, and I have a feeling after talking to you for our pre-interview, and I've done a lot of these interviews with Canadians. So I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on up there too. There's this stigma, that addicts are, you know, less, that addiction is a character flaw, or that, only
Hmm.
addicts are, shooting up behind dumpsters at 7-Elevens or whatever. But that's not the case. First of all, addiction is not a character flaw. And second of all, I was just as addicted to opiates as a heroin addict, because if I, lost a patch or missed a doctor's appointment, I would start going into withdrawals just like a heroin addict, after about 3 days. And I was rendered completely dysfunctional and miserable, and was going through the same set of withdrawals that a heroin addict would go through. The only difference between me and a heroin addict was that my dealer was in a white coat and had a stethoscope around his neck.
Hmm. Yes.
I was never abusing them or anything, but it didn't make it any different. And so, and it wasn't a character flaw. And we really need to, as a species, get over this judgment and start treating
Yeah.
this, as a disease. Just
We
like
have.
we don't judge people with cancer or diabetes or a brain tumor. We shouldn't judge people who have an addiction, as as if they have a character flaw, because it's
Yes.
not.
We do judge other people, though. We judge people who smoke.
Yep.
We judge people who may have extra weight on them according to how we judge what is extra or not extra.
Right.
And so we have little pockets of people in our communities where we've somehow society has given people permission to judge, and those are just another two. So I remember from talking with you before, but you came up with a way to get off uh, the drugs you were taking. Am
I
I
did. It was not the best way, but I had finally reached my limit. I just couldn't take it anymore. I had been, I had gotten off of them, multiple times over the course of my life. Like, when I knew I was going to get pregnant, both of my pregnancies with my sons were planned. I was in my 30s, and, I would, um, weaned down off the opiates, and everything was monitored by my doctors. I was very careful and all of that, and then I would, but I would always end up back on them. But the last time in 2017, I was on the highest dose. It was 100 mcg patches every 3 days. I would change them, of fentanyl, and then on top of that, I was taking Percocet, and they also had me on Soma, which was a muscle relaxant that was actually, introduced in the 50s as a kind of a sedative for what they thought was anxious housewives. It's a really, really bad drug.
right? Wow.
And I had all of that in my system on a regular basis. And I chose to go cold turkey, because I just never wanted to go back on any of it again. So I kind
Mhm.
of, almost by design, did it the most painful way I could think of. And it was horrific. And I barely survived it. And I would not recommend it. It's not something you should do without medical supervision. I should have been in a hospital under doctor supervision, but
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
didn't do it that way. I got off of it. But the most important thing, that I got from that experience was that I really had to completely change my mindset about not just the drugs that I was on, but about my entire life. And I really made a decision that I was no longer going to be in victim mode in my own life. And I had to really take stock of all of the chaos and the disaster that was going on in my life, and take responsibility for it, and accept the fact that about 98% of it was due to the fact that I was just continually drugged.
Mhm.
And get rid of the drugs out of my system, get rid of it all out of my life, and become a warrior in my own life story, and quit playing the victim. And so it was a whole mind shift, in addition to getting sober and clean and making 100% commitment that from now on I was going to take full responsibility for my life, both my failures and my successes, and really examine my life as a whole and move forward with a completely new mindset.
Right. And that's the sort of foundation of why you also moved forward in writing this book and looking at ways to help your children not end up where you ended up.
Yeah, I really, that I think that shift in mindset and an approach to life really was the springboard for writing The Teen Warrior. Because as I went through that, I started thinking about, okay, that was great. And it was really hard. And it was like, if I could teach my kids what I learned from this process, but if I could teach it to them on the front end, so they didn't have to go through all this torture, and lose all this time that I did, numbing out to the pain of the human condition, self-medicating, not just to the physical pain, but to the mental pain, which I had to face the fact that I was using the opiates for that too. Oh, and by the way, when I got off all the opiates, strangely enough, about 85% of my physical pain went away, because it turns out that the human brain will create phantom pain to keep getting those opiates.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Because, right. So I went off the opiates and about 85% of my pain went away. And the rest of it I've been able to manage with self-care and yoga and getting plenty of rest and exercise and eating right and, occasional Advil and Tylenol. I mean, opiates are not, they are not at all a viable solution for chronic pain. They are just not. The side effects are just horrific. And, sure, if you're, in a war and you get your arm blown off, absolutely, morphine is a great solution. If you have, if you have major surgery for the 10 days after surgery, absolutely, opiates are great. But long-term pain solution, it's just a horrific option. And so that was great too, to learn that once I gave those up, I was actually way better able to manage my pain. So after I learned all this, I was like, look, I got to figure out a way to teach my kids how to avoid this altogether. So I started researching, and I found out that, like, in Europe, they don't use opiates like we do in the States at all. Like, they are not opiate dependent. They don't give opiates after dental work. They don't give opiates after minor surgery. They don't give opiates for chronic back pain. Like, that's their last resort that they go to. They have all sorts of other solutions before, like, they do not choose opiates. That's not even in their top 10 choices to treat pain. And so I would like, what is going on? Why are they able to treat pain so successfully without jumping on the opiate train? And why is it that they don't have such a binge drinking problem like we do? Why aren't their children, why don't they have so many car accidents due to alcohol? And why don't they have drug abuse like we do over here? So I started researching that, and I had so many questions like, to tell or not to tell. Has research shown that it's better to lie to your kids about your drug and alcohol experimentation when you were their age, or is it better to be honest with them? Turns out it's better to be honest without, glamorizing it.
Right.
But it's better to be honest. And so I started studying this, and I was like, what is it that we can do or provide for our children that will give them the best chance of getting through adolescence? And when do we need to start talking to them? Kids are maturing so much faster than we did in their, when we were their age. And there's so many other drugs out there. Like, I thought I knew all the drugs on the market. There's stuff that I had no idea about when I started writing this book. And there's new drugs coming out every day. So I learned so much through the process of writing it. And I found out that there are some formula. There is a formula. There's things that you can do. And one of the main things is, as children are going through pre-adolescence, and we need to start talking to this, Americans are so we're such prudes compared to like Europeans and Canadians. And we get all freaked out about talking to our kids about drugs and alcohol, and we're like, oh, we need to wait until they're seniors in high school. No, you need to start talking to them when they're 9 or 10.
Yeah,
And
actually, they've
people,
discovered that kids are first offered drugs between the ages of 8 and 11. So
yeah,
up here, our fourth pillar in our drug program is about prevention, but all they've done is piggybacked on programs of around drug use, about drug use to kids in high school. And of course,
right.
by the time they hit high school, they've already been given drugs. They may already have a problem. So,
Exactly. You remember Nancy Reagan, just say
yes,
no to drugs? That was
yeah.
the biggest fail
Mm.
of like any social program that we've ever tried to launch in this country. Like, I mean, it was ridiculous. And, it does, so it's like, okay, telling them what to do doesn't work. Trying to scare them straight doesn't work. So what is going to work? And what I found through my research is that one of the most important things you can do for these kids is help them I get an identity and a purpose early on, because not all of us kids, and we know this for certain, a very small percentage of us, you know, have the luxury of being able to latch on to our identities early on. I mean,
Hmm.
there's maybe 5% of us that end up the jock, the valedictorian, the smart one, the funny one, the pretty one, the whoever, and those kids, they're lucky. You end up with the super musical one, the super talented one. Those kids are lucky. Right out of the gate, they have their identity, and it's great. But the rest of us are flailing around like fish out of water. And
Mm.
it's never more awkward or painful than when we're going through junior high and high school. We have
Yes.
no idea who we are. We feel completely awkward. We hate ourselves. And we're trying to find out what our value is. And so as parents, as I was researching this, it was like it became acutely obvious to me that if we can step in and intervene with our young ones at that point and help them identify some sort of value, doesn't have to be locked in for the rest of their lives, but if we can help them like find something of value that they can be a part of, whether it's like volunteering, or like with my sons, I started a little business for them on this mountain, and they became really valuable to the community, and the community just kind of started treating them like rock stars because they were out picking up litter on the weekends, and they were
Wow.
helping seniors, and they were like, oh my God, they developed an identity within the community doing these small things, and they loved it, and it became part of their identity, and it helped them avoid flailing around like little fish out of water while they were going through this very fragile time.
Mhm. We just need
And
to stop for a second, Elisa,
yeah,
and go to a couple PSAs, but we'll be right back, folks.
Tanuyap, Quiget Yuans Queensna. Hi everybody, my name is Quiget Yuans. I'm a member of the Squamish Nation and the Yagalanis clan of the Haida Nation. You're listening to Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We live, work, play, and broadcast from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm talking with Elisa Fortise Christensen about her book, Raising Addict-Resistant Kids. Elisa, you were talking about having done some research about other countries. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you learned about what they did? I know you talked about them not hiding, well, no, I'm not sure that's what you said, but you tell us.
so I started looking at why the United States specifically had such a problem with binge drinking specifically. And that, of course, that kind of abuse of alcohol led to, other risk factors like, using harder drugs. And, there is a link there, obviously. And what I found was that, like in European countries, specifically like in, Spain, Italy, France, they took a very nonchalant approach to drinking wine. For instance, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, even, in some families younger, they would have wine with dinner, and the children in those age groups would have, a small glass of wine with their parents at dinner. And what the research showed was that it took that stigma out of the alcohol, the wine, so that it was no big deal. It was not this, thing that the teens wanted to go out and try because it was, a forbidden fruit that they wanted to go out and try with their peers. And of course, in the US, we have this drinking age where, we can ship you off to war. You can sign up for the military at 18. You can get married at 18, which means you're old enough to parent a child at 18, but you're not allowed to legally drink alcohol until you're 21. It just, it makes it this big deal. And so what happens is it creates this stigma that children want to go out and get away with it. And so they do it in a big, bold way that creates a situation where they're going to do it unsafely. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, that doesn't happen. They have a much lower drinking age. In many cases, it's 16 or 18. And in many cases, these kids have been drinking wine with their families since they were 12 or 13. And they just don't have the problems that we have over here.
So let me just jump in. Let me just jump in for half a sec here. That all makes sense, to just sort of normalize the idea of drinking, and therefore you are around your parents and learning about, they're role modeling for you, maybe responsible drinking. What happens then with, and I'm not an expert on addiction, so this may be a really stupid question, but what happens to the idea that certain people in certain families have a gene that creates the addiction or the alcoholism?
Right. And by the way, I am not an expert on addiction either. Let me say that. I just did a lot of research for this book over the course of 2 years, and it was driven by my own past. I, have addiction running in my family and alcoholism running in my family on both sides. And my brother was a speed addict all of his life. My mom, was an alcoholic. My dad's dad was an alcoholic. So, I had it running on both sides of my family. And your question is a good one. And yeah, I mean, it happens, even it doesn't matter culturally or, methodically how you, raise your kids. If you have it running in your DNA, if it's trickling down through your family, mm-hmm. Like there's certain cultures that just really struggle with alcoholism. The Irish culture is known for, having a more severe problem with alcoholism. Absolutely. It's a problem. And when you and I did our pre-interview, we talked about epigenetics that they've mm-hmm. recently come across, and how, if two addicts or alcoholics raise a child in an addiction seeped environment, even if that child does not have any addiction running in their DNA, it can create a change in their actual DNA for them to be more prone to addiction or alcoholism. So we're seeing that environment can actually change our DNA code to be more susceptible, and vice versa. You can take a child that has a lot of addictive DNA or genetics running through their blood, back generations. And if you give it enough time and you raise them in around behaviors that don't have any addictive tendencies, you can actually correct that over time.
Or
So,
not.
yeah, or not.
Yeah.
It's not guaranteed, but
No,
we are
not
seeing
guaranteed.
that. Yeah, we are seeing that behavior and environment and upbringing really does have the power to have an impact on our DNA, which is huge. That's
Hmm.
amazing. And they've just discovered that. I mean, that was brand new when I was writing this book, and it was fascinating to me.
I have heard, again, I'm not an expert on drugs. I don't use drugs, other than, my Tylenol and ibuprofen.
Right.
But I have heard that drugs are being designed to be addictive on the first try. So in my age group, we were brought up to believe that if you just tried something once, that was no big deal. If you tried it over and over and over, your body would build up an addiction to that particular drug, and you would find yourself addicted. Same kind of thing. I don't know if it's the same kind of thing happens around cigarette smoking and nicotine, or whether it is the buildup that creates the addiction. I don't know. I do know that one of the things that I read was that drug dealers and people who make these drugs are working at making sure that the drugs are addictive on the first try. So kids don't even get a chance to even experiment or try something or think maybe they could just test it out. Is that true, or is this not true anymore? This was bad information that I got a while ago.
Well, I think that the drugs have gotten more powerful and stronger in some ways, and in some ways not. I mean, back when I was growing up, my brother was 20 years older than me, but I've been told, and I've seen some research to indicate that the speed that was going around back then was a lot more pure and more addictive. But there's debate on that, because the methamphetamine, the street methamphetamine that's going around today, has a lot more crap in it. They're cutting it with things that, who knows if that's more addictive or not. I will tell you this: I did research a lot of the brain chemistry and how different drugs and behaviors actually affect our brain. And I was actually researching it from the standpoint of gambling addiction at the time, because I had someone in my life that was the second gambling addict to go through my life like a wrecking ball. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really curious because I could actually see physical changes in him when he would step through the door of a casino. And I wanted to know what was happening. And so I started researching it. And what I found out was that anytime you get a behavior like gambling, an addictive behavior, or a drug or an alcohol on board, it takes your brain about 2 weeks to reestablish homeostasis with that new behavior, drug, or alcohol on board. Your brain is always trying to establish its best functioning capacity. And the term for that is homeostasis. So, for instance, if you're just a clean slate, you're not doing anything, right? But eat a Snickers bar, you start eating a Snickers bar every morning, because sugar is a drug too. After about a week and a half to 2 weeks, your brain is like, okay, so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to have we're going to have this sugar rush every morning. And after about 2 weeks, then your brain has reestablished homeostasis, getting used to, with that sugar on board every morning. So then on the 10th or 12th day, you cut that Snicker bars out of your routine, and you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to crave it, and you're going to be cranky and off balance, because your brain is going to now have to swing that pendulum back the other way and reestablish a new homeostasis without that Snicker bar on board. Same with a drug, same with a behavior, same with alcohol. And of course, those are withdrawals. That's what,
Mm-hmm.
that's why they're so severe. And depending on the strength of the drug or the behavior, or, whatever's going on. And the same thing when we fall in love, and then we, all of a sudden break up, and we go into depression and a sadness, it's the same thing. Our brain is reestablishing a new homeostasis
Right.
without that hit of love on board.
Right.
So
Yeah, people don't often cross over from the use of substances as an addiction to that, how that same process can impact you in other areas of your life. So for instance, I do a lot of work around therapy, abuse, and exploitation when I'm not on the radio. And one of the things that's become clear in that is that the abusive therapists in those situations are in fact creating a profound dependency on them in their clients.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and in that profound dependency is a very corrupt form of attachment, so that when that person is no longer in their lives, they literally go through withdrawal, just as you're talking about, from that,
Yep.
from not being able to access that person or being around that person. So even if
Yep.
it's their choice, like all of us who decide to quit something that's not good for us, it doesn't mean it's just not clean. Life, it just doesn't come in nice, neat packages. So, so even though they may be the ones that said, no, this isn't good for me and left, like somebody who's stopping using a drug, that's not good for them. They end up having the same kind of physiological responses to that.
It's a withdrawal from a toxic codependency.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I tried to do with the teen warrior, and well, before I tell you what I tried to do, the tools I tried to pull together in this book for my own sons and for other parents to give their kids tools. I had gotten the book written and I was just feeling like it didn't have enough teeth. So I actually found 6 young people that were in their early 20s that had gone through addiction and were in recovery, and I interviewed them, which really made this book everything I wanted it to be. But before I even did that, I really searched for tools that I could, like, I built a toolkit that I could give my sons and that other parents could give their children, to help them deal with the human condition. Because I've always been really honest with my boys. I'm like, look, guys, life is going to be rough. It's going to bat you around like a ping pong ball. So let me help you build tools that you can get through life with so that you don't go towards the path of trying to numb out to the human condition, to the human pain in destructive ways. In other words, so you don't pick up a joint or a pipe or a line of Coke or a bottle of alcohol, or you don't start, watching porn or working out excessively or eating excessively. Let me help you develop some healthy skills, coping skills, so that you have them in your pocket. And when you need them, you can pull them out and use those instead. And the most healthy thing that I could find in this world to give them was meditation. It's something you can do anywhere at any time. It costs them nothing, and it's a skill that's fairly easy to learn. And they can, if they keep up with it, it's like any muscle or any skill. You have to kind of stay in practice with it. But if they can pull it out while they're in court, getting a divorce or paying for a traffic ticket, or they just got in a car accident, or they're, at a job interview and they're freaking out and their anxiety's through the roof, or whatever their situation is where they need to calm themselves, or they just got broken up with by what they think is the love of their life, or whatever their situation is they're going to need to self-soothe and put a little layer of comfort between them and the world. I wanted to give them that so they didn't try to self-soothe in a destructive way. And that seemed, from all my research, to be the one thing that would help them the most and wouldn't cost them anything. And they could carry with them anywhere they went. And so I did teach them to meditate. And I've been using it a lot lately, too, because I've been stressed out, too. And so, I have to put my money where my mouth is and show them in real time every day how it can be used to manage the human condition and manage the human life. Right. And it seems to be the most effective way. And then the other thing that really, I think, I got a lot, and they got a lot out of me writing this book, was asking after I interviewed these 6 young people, 3 young men and 3 young women who had, for whatever reason, had gone through a difficult time in their lives that had triggered them ending up going down a path where they ended up addicted to drugs or alcohol. And these were kids that were from like pretty white picket fence middle class families. These, these weren't kids being raised in the ghetto in Compton. These were like pretty average run of the mill American families. And something had happened when they were about 12, 13, 14, where they either parents had gone through divorce, or they'd had a financial upheaval or a death in the family, or something had happened where things had just gone a little sideways on them, and it had triggered them to go down a path that had led to them getting addicted to drugs or alcohol.
Wow.
And it was just shocking to hear their stories, because it was, like these ballerinas and football players, and they were headed to be valedictorian and get scholarships, and they were like picture perfect. And then all of a sudden, like 2 years later, they're shooting up behind a dumpster, or they were overdosing on heroin or smoking crack pipes in the ghetto. And it's like, oh my God, I want to know what happened, and I want to know how I could prevent my child from doing that.
Okay, so let's talk about that in a couple minutes when we just come back. We'll be right back,
Absolutely.
folks.
Somebody save me from myself. I spent so long living in hell. They say my lifestyle is bad for my health. It's the only thing that seems to help. All of this drinking and smoking is hopeless, but feel like it's all that I need. Something inside of me's broken. I hold on to anything that sets me free. I'm a lost cause. Baby, don't waste your time on me. I'm so damaged beyond repair. Life has shattered my hopes and my dreams. I'm a lost cause. Baby, don't waste your time on me. I'm so damaged beyond repair. Life has shattered my hopes and my dreams.
What if the night sky was missing a moon? There were no shooting stars to use wishing on you. And all of my sorrows, I just washed them down. It's the only peace I've ever found.
All of this drinking and smoking is hopeless, but feel like it's all that I need. Something inside of me's broken. I hold on to anything that sets me free. I'm a lost cause. Baby, don't waste your time on me. I'm so damaged beyond repair. Life has shattered my hopes and my dreams. I'm a lost cause. Baby, don't waste your time on me. I'm so damaged beyond
If you want to listen to us anywhere you travel, you can go into your Google Play Store and then download the Radio Player Canada app, and you can listen to your favorite radio station, Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm speaking with Elisa Fortise Christensen about her book on teen warriors, raising addiction-resistant kids. So, Elisa, you were just telling us about these kids that you interviewed. What was the common factor for them that you discovered in talking to them?
It was fascinating because each one of their stories were eerily similar. They were all different. They had all had different upsets at critical primary points in their lives. Usually it was around 11, 12, 13. Some, pretty significant, like a death in the family of a parent or an important aunt or uncle. Sometimes it was just like, a financial upheaval or a divorce. A couple of them didn't have anything in particular, but there was one thing that they all answered very similarly that I thought was fascinating. And it was when I asked them this one question at the end of each one of their interviews. I said, if your parents could have done one thing differently that you believe could have made a difference and kept you from going down this dark path that led to you getting addicted to drugs and alcohol, what could they have done? And each one of them answered me in almost the exact same way. They first said, I don't blame my parents or hold them responsible for anything. It was my it was my doing. I made the choices that I made, which I thought was really cool that they had all gotten to the point in their recovery that they took full responsibility for their addictive behavior and where it led them. That seemed really healthy to me. It felt really healthy to me that they were taking full responsibility. But they also said, if I could go back and ask one thing of my parents, it would be that they didn't shut down communication with me. They said, I understood why they did it. They were trying to protect me because they were going through pain and they were going through stress and difficulty, and they thought they were protecting me by not talking to me about it. But what it did was it shut down the communication both ways. And so I no longer felt like I could talk to them either.
Right. That's a very profound thing for kids. You also talked about Norway, or having done some research, and maybe Norway was in our conversation prior to the interview here.
Yeah.
You described to me something that Norway does around addictions that I thought was really amazing. And well, I won't say anymore. You tell us, what does Norway do when somebody has an addiction?
So yeah, the Scandinavian countries do things really differently. Where the U.S. is banning books right now, Scandinavian countries are teaching middle school. In middle school, they're teaching empathy. They're teaching how to spot, fake news or, articles or stories generated by AI. They're on a different wavelength than we are. And I really wish we'd learn more from them. But specifically when it comes to addiction, they have an amazing success rate. Especially comparatively to the U.S., we have about an 8% success rate when we try to treat addiction. We, if you are lucky enough to have money in the U.S., you might be able to get into a detox and rehab program that lasts maybe 1 to 3 months. Then we kick you back out out of the rehab program back to where you were at, and you're usually right back to where you're friends that you used with are, and your dealers are, and your triggers are, and we're like, good luck, don't call us, we'll call you.
Right.
And that generates about an 8% success rate. In Scandinavian countries, I think it was Norway or Denmark. I apologize for not knowing, but the way they do it is they take the person they first relocate them to the other side of the country. So they're as far away from their plugs, their drug dealers, their friends that they used with, their triggers, where they bought and what reminds them of that lifestyle as they can get them. Then they treat them for a year and they detox them. They put them through rehab. They teach them everything that they could possibly know about their addiction, how their brain works, how the physiology of it, everything they need to know about addiction. Then, and here's the real kicker, here's the key to it all. They provide them with two things that I think is the absolute core of why we get addicted in the first place, why this is such a chronic disease within our species. They help them establish a purpose in life. So they find out what they love to do, what they're good at, and they train them in it. And they let them develop a career for whatever they love to do. Then they help them establish genuine, authentic relationships, friendships with new people that are real, solid friendships. And the reason why they're doing that is because they have figured out, and it's so simple when you think about it, that the two things that the human spirit cannot withstand the pain of is not having a purpose in life and not having authentic connections with other humans.
Mhm.
Those two things cause us so much pain that we will do anything to numb out to it, even if we know it's going to kill us.
Yeah.
So they provide solutions to that, and their success rate of keeping people from going back to their addiction is in the 90th percentile.
Wow.
And why we can't learn from them, I don't know. You'd think we'd wake up and look at our neighbors across the pond and say, "Wow, that's interesting. It's really working over there. What are they doing? Why is our success rate so low?" Yeah, but that's what they're doing, and it's so simple and it makes so much sense. But I think the reason why the US isn't doing it is because the US is being run by Big Pharma, the most profitable year after year corporation in the United States. And of course, they don't want us to get sober and clean because it's so lucrative if we don't.
Well, that would be true in your case where you were on prescribed medication. The question then becomes, why might drug rehab programs, I'm going to say this out loud, I can't believe it, why do drug rehab programs basically maybe not want to have people get clean and not use drugs? And of course, one could get really cynical, and I do at times get very cynical about it, and see it as a place where they'll lose their customers. If you're in a for-profit business and your customers have drug addictions, then in some ways you can't afford to have a program that works. So,
well, you know what they charge down here at these halfway houses, and drug rehabs? I think it's $25 per urine test. And they test them every single day, and they usually have like 50 beds, I think is the average size. So do the math. And they're riddled with drug abuse. Like, you go to any one of these drug houses, rehab houses down here that are supposedly, they're treating these people for drug addiction. And if you want to find street drugs, that's where you find them. It's all a game. It's all a big ruse, and it's all part of the system. And the Big Pharma knows that it's the sicker they keep us, the more money they're going to continue to make. If we get healthy, if we actually figure out that, we can actually heal our bodies with our minds and do all of that, if we actually come out from underneath that fog that is, over top of us and has so much to do with illegal drugs and pharmaceutical drugs and all of that, if we get out from underneath that fog and we actually start thinking clearly and realize just how much we can heal ourselves with our own minds as long as we're not drugged, they're going to be out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. All true. So toolbox, let's talk about your toolbox for kids. What's in it?
So yeah, that's the outline of this book. It's really a chapter outline. So I started this book by listing a lot of statistics that parents need to know, and the risk factors that make your teen more susceptible. But then, and I talk about role of family heredity and history, but the toolbox really involves a few simple things. It involves the importance. I talk about the importance of stability. Nobody has a perfect family. I raised my boys. Um, I after I got them back after a horrific custody battle. I, was a single mom struggling, and but there's even with the less than optimal conditions, you can still do this, and it involves making sure you're paying attention to emotional connection, and like these young people in recovery said, keep that level of communication open with them. um, Keep an eye on getting them engaged. Boredom is really a challenge, and we have too much, in my opinion, we have too much simulation with social media and TikTok and scrolling on their phones. I think it's important to get them outside if you can, and get them working. And I know that's not always an option. I mean, I was lucky. I raised them on top of a mountain. I wasn't raising them in a big city. But also pay attention to how you as a parent are processing your emotional pain and your stress and your boredom, because trust me, everything that you're doing, they're watching, and you're teaching them how to do it. And so that, really pay attention every day. You don't have to be perfect, but let them watch you learn new skills and healthy skills for you dealing with the human condition. And I think that's the real key, is letting them watch you deal with life and the human condition, and taking personal responsibility for regulating your own emotions in a healthy way, so that you are approaching your own life as a warrior and not a victim.
Right. Right. That makes sense.
That is so huge, because that shift in mentality, so that they understand that their life is up to them, and no matter what happens to them, it is the way they respond and react to it emotionally, and that they have control over that. If you can get that message to them, that will help them avoid being a victim, and they will become a warrior. And then they will, if you give them that tool and that mentality, and then you teach them how to regulate their emotions, that will help them avoid needing to numb out to the human condition and self-medicate.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That makes sense. Thank you, Elisa, for coming and chatting with us about this. It's a very important topic, and I know so many people who, have drug addiction in their family and worry about this kind of thing constantly. And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of information out there about how to help your kids not turn to drugs in a society that makes it so readily available to them as a coping skill. So thank you
It is.
very much.
You're welcome. And I've got one that just turned 20 this last week, and my 18-year-old is just about to graduate high school. And it, knock on wood, I think I've just about got him to adulthood. Although, boys, I don't know. Certainly, I'm hoping I've gotten them there in one piece. And it has not been a perfect journey, but and no parenting ever is. So please, parents, if you're listening to this, be gentle with yourself. It really, I've made tons of mistakes along the way. Love yourself and give yourself some grace as well. And if you would like to get this book, you can get it on authorelisa.com, authorelisa.com. That's my website. And thank you so much for honoring me with this interview. I so appreciate it,
Oh,
Bernadette.
you're
Thank
welcome,
you.
Elisa. I'm so happy to have had you come and chat with us about this very, very important topic. So thank you. And we'll be right back, folks.
Hi, folks. This is Steve Ferguson, your 21st Century Schizoid Man, and I'm coming to you on behalf of Prog Rock Alley. We are hitting up your airwaves every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m., running that whole hour, bringing you the very best of progressive rock. That includes art rock, math rock, experimental, alternative, a little bit of everything, and sometimes I just sneak in a favorite song of mine just for the hell of it, because I can. Every Tuesday night at 7 p.m., if you want it, I got it. Just name it, I'll play it. That's Prog Rock Alley on CFRO 100.5 FM.
I'm Bernadine Fox, and that's our show. My thanks to Elisa Fortise Christensen for coming and chatting with me about her experience being addicted to prescription fentanyl and her book, Teen Warrior, Raising Addiction-Resistant Kids, where she outlines how to give your kids tools to cope with life without turning to drugs. Music today was by Jelly Roll and Sherry Ulrich. And to you, our listeners, you are why we do this every week. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or somehow when they fall from your lips, I'm convinced you're right.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.